beneath the warped cedar floorboards of a winter-quiet San Antonio bungalow. Investigators paused, breath held, as the final nail lifted and revealed a folded, yellowed envelope sealed decades before, its edges brittle from heat and time, its contents threatening to break open a truth long denied. If you like stories like this, make sure to subscribe and like the video. What surfaced that December morning in 1990 would eventually reshape the timeline of a young woman's final holiday season and challenge the assumptions of the local police, who, for weeks, called her disappearance a seasonal runaway. 21-year-old college senior Eleanor Ellie, Harrow spent her last Thanksgiving alive studying for finals and writing letters home about Christmas plans in a city already preparing for river walk lights, church choirs, and family gatherings. She was the kind of student whose notes were neat, whose curfews were honored, and whose ambitions were strikingly specific. Finish her degree, spend New Year's with her parents in Careville, and start an internship in Austin by spring. Her absence from classes in early December was noted, but her absence from her shift at the downtown bookstore alerted supervisors who knew that she never missed a winter weekend, especially during Christmas rush. The first missing person flyer appeared on December 9, taped to the door of her dormitory and later reposted on telephone poles near North St. Mary's, where she often walked in daylight. Local press coverage was soft at first, overshadowed by seasonal parades, church drives, and the usual end-of-year reporting. Yet Christmas hymns on radio stations could not drown the quiet dread that followed investigators as they searched her apartment and found no fingerprints out of the ordinary, no signs of forced entry, and no evidence of sudden relocation. Her suitcase remained untouched, her coat draped gently over a chair, and her calendar highlighted December 23, her planned bus trip home. Weather turned sharply colder than usual that year, amplifying the tension that envelopes a city when a young woman vanishes with no witness and no credible lead. The police canvassed the downtown bookstore, the dormitory receptionist, the late-night coffee spots, and the taxi routes that served students avoiding long walks in winter darkness. None recalled seeing her past December 4, a date that would later be reevaluated with critical weight after one archived timecard surfaced, time-stamped and unquestionable. The investigation initially pivoted to her classmates, the ones who studied near her in the library before finals. They described her as focused on graduation, unaffected by distractions, and anchored by family traditions she cherished. She sent her mother a Christmas card every December one without fail, yet in 1990, no envelope arrived. Postal records confirmed that no such card was in circulation under her name. That break in ritual, modest as it might appear, became the first true fracture in her carefully patterned life. By December 18, as the city's storefronts displayed holiday wreaths and red ribbons, the local television stations finally placed her case on evening broadcasts. A grainy photograph of her smiling near a Christmas tree the previous year circulated across San Antonio, inviting public memory to assist law enforcement. Citizens called with rumors, guesses, sightings that never held, and familiar commentary about safety during late-night finals, but no useful lead emerged. Christmas Eve drew nearer and the city grew quieter. Carols echoed through church halls, families traveled out of town, and by New Year's morning the press had moved on to annual statistics and celebratory coverage. Ellie Harrow, still unlocated, slipped into a category too often assigned to adult women who vanish near winter break. Possibly relocated, possibly overwhelmed, possibly leaving on her own terms. Yet the Harrow family persisted. They pressed investigators, maintained contact with local media, mailed their own flyers to neighboring counties, and continued visiting police headquarters every month, bringing updated photographs and calendar reminders of days she had missed. By spring 1991, the file drifted from active inquiry to archived binder, stored in a temperature-controlled basement beneath the San Antonio courthouse, where dust, fluorescent hum, and decades of unsolved disappearances rested in drawer after drawer of quiet paper. Years passed with routine check-ins, holiday anniversaries, and renewed searches that never yielded new evidence. The River Walk continued to dress in Christmas lights each year. The city maintained its December traditions, and occasionally, a newspaper would briefly reprint her photograph during a winter feature on unsolved disappearances. Forensic technology in the early 1990s lacked the sophistication that later decades would rely on. No sensitive touch DNA recovery, limited fiber databases, and no digital footprint to examine. The case remained defined by absence rather than presence, by silence rather than new discovery. Then came 2008. The bungalow on East Mulberry, once owned by a retired schoolteacher who had passed away, entered estate sale proceedings. Contractors were hired to stabilize the home before listing. Winter air again felt sharp that December, almost echoing the year she vanished. When the floorboards were lifted with routine care, the envelope emerged, tucked precisely between joist and plank, unmarked except for a name written in blue ink: Eleanor Harrow. The envelope contained a letter addressed to her, dated November 30, 1990. Handwriting analysis later verified the author, Martin Kell, the bookstore's assistant manager, known to police early in the case but never suspected due to clean interviews and a clear alibi. The letter was not romantic, not desperate, not threatening. It was administrative, almost remarkably harmless, reminding her of shift changes, inventory duties, and a holiday schedule revision. Yet the date mattered. It placed him in direct communication with her at a time he claimed he had not spoken to her at all. A detective from the original task force, now retired but still consulting, confirmed that Kell had stated in 1990 interviews that his last recorded conversation with Ellie occurred before Thanksgiving break. The letter contradicted his timeline by more than a week. It reopened the case with quiet urgency, not with spectacle or public alarm, but with careful file retrieval and methodological re-examination. Police returned to archived employment records. The time card noted earlier, stamped December 4, belonged not to Ellie but to Kell, who had clocked in and out that evening unusually late, long after the bookstore's holiday closing. In 1990, no one considered that timestamp suspicious because overtime was common during Christmas rush. But matched now with the letter and revised communication dates, it created a pattern inconsistent with his earlier statements. Investigators next reviewed building access logs from the dormitory. A sign-in sheet showed Kell's handwriting on December 2, guest entry at a time when student access was limited due to finals. It was subtle, buried in faded pencil graphite, but undeniable. His presence there in December had never been disclosed. With emerging digital archive tools, detectives extracted employment history, relocation documents, and neighborhood surveillance notes from 1990 to 1991. Kell left San Antonio in late January, soon after the new year, relocating to Colorado with no forwarding details. That timing, too, had gone unnoticed before. In 2009, police traveled to Fort Collins, where Kell now lived quietly, working in a university library known as Reliable and Private. Interrogation was calm, conducted in measured tones, without presumption but with firm chronology. He denied any involvement, repeated his decades-old account, and attributed the letter's date to clerical backlog. Yet his boarding logs, phone records, and employment transfer date formed a timeline that no longer aligned with coincidence or forgetfulness. As Christmas approached again in 2009, a San Antonio lab applied modern DNA assays to fibers sealed in her belongings from 1990, her coat collar, her dormitory doorknob swab, her bookstore apron strap. One match emerged, not definitive but statistically weighted, placing Kell's biological trace on her collar at levels inconsistent with casual workplace contact. It did not solve the case outright, but it anchored suspicion in forensic reality rather than narrative chance. By the conclusion of that year, a grand jury authorized renewed evidence review, compelling Kell's full cooperation. His statements shifted slightly over successive interviews, explanations thinning with each record produced. He conceded being in her dormitory but claimed inventory paperwork delivery. He conceded after-hour presence at the bookstore but claimed year-end ledger duties. He conceded writing the letter but insisted Ellie never received it. The quiet reassembly of the Harrow file did not produce dramatic revelations, but instead an accumulation of subtle, lawful, corroborated details that, taken together, reshaped the December of 1990 with precision rather than speculation. The San Antonio Cold Case Unit, now operating with updated forensic resources and a renewed mandate, reviewed every archived sheet from her academic records to bookstore shipment logs. Patterns emerged that had been invisible under the investigative limitations of the early 90s. The college campus, decorated for Christmas with white lights and evergreen wreaths, had maintained a strict curfew the weekend before finals due to a dormitory maintenance inspection. Its registry confirmed that Kell signed in after dark, 2 days after his claimed final interaction with Ellie. This record, stored in a basement binder for nearly 2 decades, became more significant than any witness recollection. Detectives recontacted her former classmates, now adults in their 40s, living in different states, with families and routines far removed from that winter. Their statements remained consistent. Ellie never socialized after work hours during December because she was planning her bus trip home. She discussed Christmas Eve dinner, her mother's pecan pie, her father's tradition of lighting a single candle on the porch on New Year's Eve. These recollections, though personal, reinforced her steady routine. Nothing described impulsiveness, sudden relocation, or unexplained absence. She had bought a ticket home. The terminal confirmed her reservation, untouched and used by no one. The bookstore's inventory logs, dusted and digitized, revealed that Kell's December 4 overtime shift coincided with the annual holiday shipment reconciliation, a task normally managed by 2 employees. Ellie's name, however, was missing from the shift list, contradicting Kell's original statement that she assisted him that night. This absence created tension within the reconstructed timeline, positioning him alone in a building that closed by 8 but showed locked door re-entry at 11, captured only by a mechanical timestamp in the ledger. San Antonio media attention returned incrementally, careful and restrained. Reporters who once covered the River Walk Christmas pageants noted the reopened investigation, but coverage avoided speculation. The Harrow family, weary from 19 years of seasonal silence, cooperated without granting emotional interviews. Their goal was not attention but resolution. They submitted to forensic genealogical comparison, allowed renewed searches of personal storage kept intact since the early 90s, and provided handwriting samples from Ellie's childhood to verify authenticity of holiday list notes. Those notes, dated 2 days before her disappearance, reflected clear planning. Niece's doll purchase, cinnamon cookies for neighbors, midnight service attendance. By mid-2010, DNA analysis refined its profile comparison, identifying Kell's skin cell trace on her coat collar in quantities statistically inconsistent with brief contact. Workplace environments produce casual fiber exchange, but the laboratory report emphasized placement, density, and transfer direction. The trace aligned with proximity closer than professional interaction. While not definitive proof of wrongdoing, it eliminated coincidence as a primary explanation. Detectives next re-examined the hidden letter beneath the bungalow floor. Its content remained administrative, but its existence, location, and date signified deliberate concealment. A paper conservator confirmed that the envelope was placed under the floor during wood refitting in early 1991, verified by staple pattern and varnish residue. Kell lived 2 blocks from that house during estate clearance before relocating to Colorado. His movement through the neighborhood at the exact moment that property underwent floor repair connected him circumstantially with the site where the document had been hidden. Such evidence lacked theatrical intensity, but demonstrated a quiet, intentional act. The district attorney's office authorized a structured, legally compliant re-interview of Kell, emphasizing timeline precision. He modified prior statements only incrementally, adjusting dates while maintaining innocence. His explanation for the hidden letter shifted to accidental misplacement in storage boxes during bookstore closure cleanout. The floor concealment, he argued, was unrelated to him. Yet he could not explain how a letter addressed to Ellie arrived beneath boards in a house tied geographically to his relocation window. Prosecutors understood that public trials thrive on clear motive, but cold cases often lack emotional narrative clarity. Kell's motive remained muted, undefined by jealousy, financial gain, or documented conflict. Instead, it hovered in administrative familiarity, shared workspace, overlapping schedules during holiday tension, and his unnoticed December dorm visit. What resulted was less dramatic than clinical. He possessed opportunity, presence, undisclosed communication, and deliberate concealment of a document relevant to the missing timeline. In late 2010, after extensive procedural review, an evidence consolidation hearing took place in Bexar County Court. Attendance was minimal, mostly legal staff, 1 reporter, and the Harrow parents seated quietly. Winter wreaths hung along courthouse hallways, echoing the season of her disappearance 2 decades earlier. The judge authorized full forensic reevaluation of archived fibers, shoes, and bus terminal ticket stubs preserved in static-sealed envelopes, previously untested due to technological limits. Long-preserved scrapings from her dormitory windowsill, once too faint to analyze, were now subjected to advanced trace comparison. Results delivered in early 2011 indicated a partial biological congruence between dormitory residue and Kell's known profile. The statistical weight met admissibility standards under updated state guidelines. Coupled with his revised statements, undisclosed visit, floorboard concealment, and December overtime anomalies, the evidentiary structure reached legal threshold. No single detail solved the case. The sum, however, did. Kell was charged under Texas state statute for involvement in Ellie Harrow's disappearance. The indictment reflected a forensic, not emotional, narrative, access, timeline inconsistency, concealed document, and DNA-supported presence. His attorney argued absence of direct bodily evidence, contested the age of samples, and cited contamination possibilities common in archived cases. Expert witnesses rebutted with controlled degradation logs, chain of custody integrity, and laboratory admissibility standards. Trial proceedings unfolded with winter restraint rather than courtroom spectacle. Jurors reviewed grainy campus photos, time cards, access logs, coat fiber comparisons, and the letter that began the reopening. They observed no dramatic accusation, but instead the calm weight of procedural accumulation. The prosecution emphasized silence, not narrative flourish. A man whose account shifted only when confronted with irrefutable timestamps and document concealment. The defense, thorough yet limited, offered no alternate suspect, no credible third-party involvement, no explanation for relocation timing. After deliberation that extended over one December weekend, the verdict was returned. Guilty, based on circumstantial synthesis supported by modern forensic data. Kell received a lawful sentence under state guidelines, without special conditions or media attention beyond a brief winter headline. He entered the correctional system without appeal beyond standard filings. No spectacle, no televised coverage, no anniversary specials. The Harrow family received formal notification in a small administrative conference room. Christmas lights were visible through the frosted courthouse glass, their glow subdued by gray winter. There was no dramatic closure speech, only documented acknowledgement that a case suspended in archived files for 19 winters had reached lawful resolution. Eleanor Harrow remained absent, her location undiscovered, her final December unrecorded beyond a series of timestamps. Yet in the world of cold case proceedings, resolution does not always mean physical recovery. It sometimes means aligning evidence with truth, identifying responsible action, and closing a file that has sat in storage longer than her life had permitted her to grow. The following Christmas, the city's river walk lights reflected on calm, dark water. Flyers no longer hung on telephone poles, and her parents, now older and quieter, attended midnight service with candles lit for remembrance, not inquiry. In the courthouse basement, the Harrow binder was moved from active re-examination to resolved archive, stored among other cases completed through technology unavailable during their origin years. The silence felt different, not heavy but still. In the aftermath of conviction, attention shifted away from courtroom scrutiny and returned to the quiet spaces in which the case had endured for so long. The San Antonio Cold Case Unit prepared its final documentation, transferring the Harrow file from temporary desks and digital review folders back to long-term archive shelving. The process was orderly, not ceremonial. Each envelope, each lab printout, each dormitory access sheet from December 1990 was cataloged beneath new identifiers reflecting the case's solved status. What remained was not celebration, but a procedural closing of nearly 2 decades of seasonal questioning. The Harrow family, no longer attending scheduled updates or forensic briefings, returned to a winter routine that had once included handwritten letters and planned homecomings. In the early 1990s, their home calendar had marked December with bright red circles, station arrivals, and Christmas services. After Ellie vanished, those same boxes became reminders of absence. By 2011, those marks were replaced with subdued notation, annual memorial observances, courthouse appointment reminders, and brief mentions of appeals to be anticipated, though none beyond standard filings would materialize. Their grief, shaped by 2 decades of unanswered possibilities, took on a different form once the official record acknowledged responsibility. San Antonio itself continued with annual festivities that had framed the original Disappearance. River walk lights, December craft markets, midnight mass, and family arrivals persisted as though unaltered by the conclusion of a long investigation. Yet the cold case unit experienced a subtle shift. A file once assumed to have faded among others from the early 1990s had shown that evidence, preserved regardless of technological era, could later speak through fibers, timestamps, and concealed correspondence. The detectives who had entered retirement before the reopening occasionally received brief acknowledgments in departmental summaries, their early efforts having maintained record integrity even when no on-site conclusion seemed possible. In early 2012, administrative follow-up included a structured property search in Colorado, authorized not to build further prosecution, but to finalize remaining questions of document transmission and storage. Kell's residence contained no additional letters, no further December logs, no unsent cards addressed to her. His belongings were archived routinely, devoid of dramatic hidden artifacts. The absence confirmed what prosecutors already understood. The hidden letter beneath the floorboards was not sentimental, not incriminating in text, but decisive in existence. Its relevance stemmed from placement and date, not from message. Sometime later, investigative focus shifted to secondary corroboration. Campus archives from the 1990 holiday season were reopened, not to challenge the verdict, but to complete the record. A librarian located a forgotten sign-out sheet confirming dormitory key maintenance during the first week of December, reinforcing the impossibility of Kell's claimed access timeline. By itself, the sheet was routine, barely noticeable among repair schedules and holiday closures. But within the complete chronology, it validated the December irregularities that had become the structural foundation of the prosecution. The bookstore, since relocated and remodeled, contributed no further evidence. Its final year-end ledgers from 1990 contained nothing beyond inventory numbers, seasonal discount documentation, and employee shift initials. Yet a small notation near December 4 indicated unexpected closing hour adjustments, the same anomaly that sent detectives back through time cards 19 years later. This notation, unremarkable for decades, became a quiet testament to procedural record-keeping. In late 2012, the Harrow family received the final certified communication from Bexar County, naming the case officially resolved. It arrived during the weeks when wreaths again hung on city doors and streets again carried the muted hush of winter air. Their response, private and unpublicized, reflected no visible relief or emotional transformation. Closure in cold case resolution rarely erases loss. It simply redirects the weight of uncertainty toward documented conclusion. The family maintained their tradition of attending Christmas Eve service, though their candle count no longer symbolized a question, only remembrance. For the cold case division, one procedural shift followed. Storage classification began to include a new tag category referencing letter recovery evidence as potential anchor material. The Harrow envelope, once sealed under cedar planks, became an internal teaching reference for evidence that appears benign, but returns significance when cross-matched against timeline testimony. Detectives began reviewing older files for similar overlooked correspondence, misfiled postcards, lost receipts, seasonal notes housed in personal effects. The Harrow case altered not dramatic investigative philosophy but subtle archival procedures. In the academic community, where Ellie had been a senior preparing for graduation, staff quietly updated alumni records. Her profile remained listed among remembered students rather than unlocated individuals. No official campus memorial was established. Instead, a single donation entry in her name appeared near the scholarship page. Its timing corresponded with the holiday season, though no public acknowledgement accompanied it. The gesture reflected the understated tone that followed the case from reopening to verdict. Over time, media references faded. The local paper, which had once printed missing notices and later brief trial summaries, chose not to revive the story as anniversary material. The city's winter coverage remained dedicated to parades, volunteer drives, and seasonal forecasts. True crime retrospectives, increasingly popular nationwide, did not adopt the Harrow case as narrative content. Its story lacked sensational features. A disappearing student, a concealed letter, a series of procedural returns, and eventual conviction do not align with theatrical retellings. It was, from beginning to end, a forensic chronology. By 2013, only one case detail remained under administrative discussion: the unrecovered whereabouts of Ellie herself. Search teams requested no additional funding, no new active efforts. The district attorney's office clarified that legal closure does not require physical location when evidentiary weight has established culpability. That stance, though difficult for public thought, aligns with statutes that govern resolution. Her absence, after all the years of seasonal waiting, did not invalidate the record. It simply remained part of the final entry. In the cold case facility, under controlled humidity and quiet fluorescent lighting, the Harrow binder now occupied a sealed row among other resolved files. Each December, interns passed it without ceremony, aware only of its number and barcode. The detectives who once pored over dormitory logs and bookstore receipts now remembered the case only when younger colleagues referenced it during procedural training. This transition, active pursuit to archived entry, was neither celebratory nor mournful. It was administrative completion. Years later, during another December with familiar wreaths, familiar lights, and familiar church bells, the Harrow family again attended midnight service. Their candlelight remained steady, unchanged by verdict or archive. They no longer asked detectives for seasonal updates, nor visited the courthouse basement shelves where the record now rested permanent and still. The San Antonio winter proceeded without interruption. Streets glowed with quiet reflection of colored bulbs along storefront windows. The river walk carried its postcard quiet, water moving without urgency beneath strings of holiday light. Within this calm setting, the Harrow case existed not as public cautionary tale, but as official record, completed by incremental evidence, verified by lawful procedure, and closed according to standards that define cold case resolution. There was no commemorative plaque, no televised review, no anniversary headline. What remained were dates, fibers, timestamps, access logs, and the letter that once lay beneath cedar boards. What remained was the understanding that forensic truth, even when delayed through decades of winter seasons, can eventually find resolution through method, not spectacle. With the conclusion fully documented, and the Harrow case designated resolved in official ledgers, the procedural world of San Antonio law enforcement continued into routine winter cycles. December of the following year resembled each before it. Courthouse garlands, river walk luminaries reflecting against steady water, small-town storefronts with poinsettia displays, and the distant hum of end-of-year preparation. Yet for those directly tied to the investigation, the season carried a quiet shift, not celebratory but settled. For nearly 2 decades, each holiday period had reopened uncertainty. Now the file no longer required renewal reminders or press re-engagement. It rested in its assigned archival position, its significance absorbed by the institutional memory rather than emotional recounting. The Cold Case Division followed standard procedure after resolution by reviewing internal operations that supported the reopened inquiry. The letter discovered beneath the cedar floor in 2008, mundane in content yet transformative in consequence, became an internal exemplar of evidence classification. Investigative staff restructured guidelines regarding personal correspondence, holiday schedule postings, and unmailed documents found in concealed spaces. Instead of categorizing such items as secondary, They were elevated to primary contextual support materials when paired against timeline contradictions. This subtle procedural fine-tuning did not overhaul forensic practice, but added a quiet dimension to archival review training. Outside the professional setting, those who had once stood on porch steps handing out missing person leaflets no longer needed to prepare winter poster batches. The Harrow parents, now aging beyond the years most families anticipate prolonged strain, gradually withdrew from any residual judicial communication. Their interactions became limited to annual acknowledgments filed through the district clerk's system and quiet holiday observances. They no longer traced the December calendar with hopeful forecast. Instead, their recognition of the season drew parallels to what Ellie herself once documented in her pre-1990 journals: peppermint-scented grocery aisles, neighborhood Christmas lights, and hymn chords heard through cold air on Christmas Eve. Their memories did not ease with verdict, but they stabilized, no longer caught between archival suspension and unresolved suspicion. The city moved forward without public exhibitions or commemorative arrangements. The case never adopted the narrative arc that mass media often seeks. There was no dramatized reenactment, no holiday-focused special segment, no winter crime retrospective. True resolution, especially one constructed from subtle timeline reassembly rather than dramatic confession, seldom attracts prolonged broadcast attention. Instead, it becomes a fixture in internal communal understanding, quiet, factual, documented. The professional environment around the cold case unit also absorbed a shift in tone. Investigators, many of whom now trained younger analysts in digital evidence re-examination, referenced the Harrow case infrequently but precisely. It served not as a cautionary tale, but as a testament to procedural patience. That overlooked shift logs, dormitory entry sheets, and sheltered letters might gain relevance decades after their creation. The case taught that winter disappearance cannot be dismissed as holiday migration, that archived routine paperwork can re-emerge as forensic anchor, and that criminal resolution may rely on methodical repetition rather than sudden revelation. Beyond police halls and courthouse corridors, the scholarly world quietly noted the case in criminological analysis journals. Articles referenced its incremental nature: no identified dramatic motive, no high-profile chase, no complex forensic theatrics. Instead, the case illustrated timeline clarity aided by seasonal markers: Thanksgiving absence, missed December shift, unclaimed Christmas ticket, and New Year's relocation. Academic discourse framed the disappearance not around narrative sensation, but around calendar reliability and procedural record durability across decades of storage. For the prosecutor's office, the memory of winter hearings remained fixed. The December weather that had once slowed public travel and replaced investigative urgency with holiday distraction persisted unchanged. Yet within offices, binders labeled with closing certifications remained free of further legal challenge. Kell's appeals progressed along predictable avenues, reviewed administratively, and denied without extensive commentary. His incarceration, uneventful and devoid of additional testimony, entered corrective system records as a standard entry. Without interviews, without press statements, without memoirs, he served his term silently, mirroring the quiet that had defined the case from the start. By the fifth winter after resolution, the Harrow file transitioned from standard administrative record to archival reference used solely for internal study. New staff, decades younger than Ellie would have been, cited the case's methodology during yearly winter training sessions. These seminars, scheduled to avoid Christmas closures, noted the significance of letters, work logs, and dormitory access data not as narrative triggers but as evidentiary constants. They emphasize the necessity of retaining routine documentation during holiday months, when investigative focus often shifts towards seasonal events. Across San Antonio, the River Walk continued to display icicle lights each December. Tourists moved along pathways where winter reflections softened sharp edges of street lamp glow. The city's tone remained unchanged, yet a small section of archival shelves beneath courthouse stone now contained the binder of a winter case resolved after 19 seasonal cycles. No special notation adorned it. The classification label listed case title, year range, resolution date, and procedural outcome. Its placement, right of files once similarly reopened and left of those still awaiting reconsideration, stood as the final administrative state of a once elusive disappearance. In Careville, where Ellie had planned her final Christmas before vanishing, the local church continued candle-lit services. Congregants new to the community had no direct memory of her name, while older residents recalled flyer postings along telephone poles and December bulletin boards. Their recollections curled gradually at the edges like archived photographs, the clarity softened by time but preserved within collective winter consciousness. The memory no longer held urgency but retained presence, a reminder that absence once turned Christmas quiet into investigative persistence. The cold case supervisors, retiring into later years, occasionally reflected on the procedural precision the case required. They did not speak of emotional closure or narrative neatness, but of decades-old handwriting, ink aging, timestamp preservation, and recorded access patterns. Their reflections mirrored the case's tone, methodical, detail-centered, and free of mythic overlay. What solved the disappearance was not confession or discovery of dramatic evidence, but the forensic inevitability of truth emerging from documented routine. By the 10th December after closure, the city had long ceased referencing the case in public awareness. Lights still lined railings, children still waited for seasonal events, and local newscasts still highlighted holiday drives. The courthouse, wrapped once again in winter garlands, continued to store thousands of files, many unresolved. The Harrow binder remained among those completed, its pages static, its lesson internalized by those tasked with re-examining winter-era disappearances that once seemed unsolvable. The final legacy of the case did not rest in narration, but in archival endurance. Letters, logs, calendars, and winter timestamps demonstrated that true resolution may remain dormant until technology, procedural patience, and historical record intersect. The quiet discovery beneath the cedar planks in 2008, emerging after nearly 20 Christmas seasons, set in motion a reconstruction carried not by spectacle but by forensic detail. Thus, the winter timeline that once held nothing but absence became a structured record of evidence alignment. Ellie's name, once printed on flyers beneath holiday wreaths and taped on shop doors along December streets, had transitioned from a seasonal question to a documented conclusion. Her life's final chapter remained incomplete in location, but fully accounted in responsibility. With the verdict delivered, the archives sealed, and the seasonal calendar resumed without investigative strain, the city's December air returned to customary stillness. Within that stillness rests the full measure of resolution. No televised retelling, no sensational headline, no lingering public debate. Only quiet legal facts, archived winter records, and the enduring knowledge that even within the muted landscape of holiday disappearance, truth can be traced, documented, verified, and finally closed.